I used to play video games because I thought they were fun. These days, I like them to choke me a little, spit in my mouth, and call me a bitch. It's a different kind of entertainment. There's a smug satisfaction that comes from bashing my head against the wall until I'm nothing more than a fine mist of blood and quarks. Fine enough to slip through tiny gaps in the molecular structure of the wall and emerge on the other side a triumphant subatomic sludge. It's a primal thing. Fuck you, game. You think you're better than me, game? I'll show you what I do with naughty little games like... According to the player base, you don't have the right. But keep in mind that this is the same group of people that thinks this is a dog, and besides, doesn't everybody have the right to enjoy the dark fantasy world of George R.R. Miyazaki? There's been debate for over a decade now about the apparently prohibitive difficulty of games in From Software's Souls series, of which Elden Ring is absolutely a card-carrying member, but I've always maintained that the difficulty of these games has been oversold somewhat. Souls games are mechanically unique, so they take some getting used to, but once you get into the swing of things, you should be fine. But over the past month or whatever, I've watched my Discord community experience Elden Ring, with some people being entirely new to the series, but very gung-ho to get into the open world of the lands between. I looked forward to seeing them fall in love with a series of games that are important to me, but instead, I watched them give up, one at a time. And these are no slouches. I refuse to play shooters with Dakota because I can't find my bearings or a gun before he scores about 6 headshots. But he couldn't handle the hot heat of the very first major boss in Limgrave. Dr. Pickledick made it a couple zones further before he came up against the might of Radon on his itty-bitty pony. But the results were the same. He quit, with much fanfare, and apparently a keyboard bent beyond repair. But what kind of degenerate plays Souls games on a keyboard anyway? Me? I'm a seasoned veteran, with a cheap, moderately functional Logitech controller with a wireless range shorter than my dongle, and I kinda got my ass handed to me by the first boss, and I don't think I could blame my dongle for it. Thing is, this game is markedly different from past titles in the series, and yes, it's a series. This is Dark Souls 4 with a new marketing strategy. This is an Estus flask, and this is a bonfire, and I absolutely refuse to try finger butthole. I'm more of a tongue man, Dark Souls 2 style. Elden Ring's open world design changes things, and when I found myself smashing my face against the apparent wall that is Margit the Fell, the game was trying to teach me the important gameplay mechanic of fucking off for a few hours somewhere else. There's a lot to do in this world, and while my hubris led me to believe I could rush through the content like a naked soul level 1 with a very large club, I learned quickly that it pays off to have a poke around and level up a bit before tackling the game's legacy dungeons. No matter what you're up against, there are always options available to you. Go gain a few levels, find some armor, and power up your favorite weapon by way of the vast open fields of opportunity. The game is never really too hard for you to take on if you have the patience to fart around until you meet your own personal required power level. Really, it's best not to call the open world content here optional at all. In other RPGs, you have the choice of following the main questline or optionally going off on some completely unnecessary series of side adventures to delve into the lore or win a fancier horse. But here, you should explore every map exhaustively and do basically every last thing you can think to do in it. If you don't, you're gonna lag behind the difficulty curve a fair bit, or run out of upgrade materials for your weapon and spirit ashes. Back in my day, people would tell you to get good, but here it's equally viable to get lost. It can be frustrating to roam around looking for content that feels satisfyingly difficult, but that content is always there, somewhere, and you're gonna have to find it, or cry trying. There are other ways to get through the rough patches. The game allows you to summon other players to help you beat the vast majority of boss encounters, which can completely trivialize most fights, but maybe that's what you want if your goal is just to move on and see what's next. When people ask for an easy mode in games like this, it's kind of what they're looking for. Though it's not exactly a guaranteed win. I was having trouble with Commander Niles, so I said to myself, hey, I've resisted summoning reinforcements thus far, and besides, I should get some footage of FromSoft's unique multiplayer features. I whipped out my finger thingy and summoned a random nerd for help, only to watch them be absolutely demolished. This went on for some time. I was determined to get the footage at this point, so I summoned player after player, and they all just sort of ran in and died immediately. But at least it was kind of funny. In the end, my own Mimic Tier, or Tear, was the best battle companion I ever could have hoped for. But you know, that's one more way to make the game easier for yourself. If you don't want to engage in multiplayer, the AI summons the game offers can be very powerful, and you can pick one tailored to your own playstyle and level it up right alongside your character. A lot of bosses have cheese strategies anyway. Guides will get you through anything the drugs and alcohol will not, and when all else fails, you can take up the dark arts of magic and melt everyone you meet into cute little ornamental figurines you can share with friends and family. Or change up your weapons, because no matter how much you see yourself as an agile little roly boy, it's often nothing a pile of HP and a greatsword can't fix. The difficulty of Elden Ring should be perfectly manageable for almost any player. The game wasn't designed to be hard, it was designed to be challenging, and I tell you, there's a big difference between those two words. The phrase tough but fair feels overused at this point, only serving to differentiate between actual video games and ridiculous shit like Kaizo ROM hacks for Super Mario World. But the fairness of Elden Ring, at least in its combat, is actually pretty important. This game doesn't specifically want you to feel frustrated, it's just willing to let you feel frustrated. One of the great changes to Elden Ring compared to the first 3 or 4 or whatever games in the series is that when you do fail, you can try again almost straight away. Gone are the tedious and sometimes perilous runs back from the bonfire to take another crack at the boss. Checkpoints are more plentiful and much more forgiving here. I like to use Celeste as an example of perfectly satisfying difficulty in video games. That game feels genuinely impossible at times, but when you die, you respawn instantly and feel motivated to make another attempt at the sequence that killed you. It's like playing one of those absolutely bullshit Kaizo hacks I mentioned, but with save states. And eventually, anybody can put together a tool-assisted speedrun. Elden Ring aims to get you back into the action with minimal downtime, so it feels good to try again. And that's the key difference. You're not punished for your failures, you just learn from them and press on. While I don't think Elden Ring is mechanically too difficult for almost any player, I'm not sure that's asking the right question. Mechanical difficulty is only one factor in why a player might perceive a game as being hard, and there are a couple questions I have about Elden Ring that I think are more interesting. With all of the ways players can modify the difficulty of the game, I think when we talk about difficulty in Elden Ring, we're actually talking about difficulty curve and pacing. And here, there are cracks in FromSoft's critic-proof hyper armor. The start of the game is more frustrating than it might need to be. You're thrown into a world that you're largely unprepared to handle, and the developers expect you to take your licks and learn from them right away. It makes those first steps out into the lands between feel kind of shitty for a lot of players. Throughout the game, you often end up feeling directionless if you're not following a guide of some sort. Sometimes the best place for you to head next is a location you absolutely would never expect. And if you don't happen to find yourself on the right path at all times, you're probably going to feel the need to go back and grind XP or resources in previous areas for a good while. It's up to you if that sounds like a good time or not. For me, the pacing suffers the most right at the end of the game. Once you reach the last major zone, you'll probably think you're close to donezo, but there's much left to be done. In my case, I was at least 20 levels below the recommendation for pretty much everything ahead of me. Boss fights started to feel really unfair, and I wound up going back to scour old zones for all the content that I'd missed. I actually put the game away for days at a time at this stage because it was just such a slog to get through, and I was getting burnt out on the content. Margit the Fell might have given me trouble on my first attempt, but it felt damned good when I came back with my trusty claymore and showed him what I'm really made of. Later in the game, I abandoned my traditional quality build and picked up an overpowered sword that shot magical beams and kept me at a safe cowering distance. and that got me through the rest of the way. And while I was writing this video, both of the players on my Discord server who had dramatically quit the game in frustration returned for vengeance, and by golly, they got it. Nothing could have made me happier than to see those guys celebrate their victories after taking a little time off to go buy new peripherals. Elden Ring isn't harder than any of the previous games in the series, but nor is it really any easier, at least mechanically. But what it does offer over past titles is a little more forgiveness and accessibility for those who have the time and motivation to tackle the incredible content ahead of them. There are spots where the pacing of the game really lags, though, and if you're not willing to grind it out through the rough patches, the game will feel not only too difficult, but potentially quite bloated. It's not for everyone. But even if you've never played a game like this before, believe me, you can absolutely do it. It doesn't matter if it takes you a week or 6 months, you'll get there if you really want to, and you'll be glad you came. So, hey, it's been a while since I posted a video here. I've been investing all of my time into my fledgling Discord community over the past year, and if you like this video, you'd probably fit in over there. I also just recently started streaming on Twitch, so check me out over there if you think you would like much lower quality content than these videos. Let me know what you think in the comments, and what games you want to see covered here. And I'll see you again soon, probably. Almost definitely. I wouldn't just wander off and do something else for like a year again.